It's Jimmy Smith. I'm back with my pre-fight breakdown, UFC 244, the BMF belt on the line. This is a card a lot of people are looking forward to for a lot of good reasons. It's also difficult to predict and break down because so many of the fights are even. They're extremely well matched, which you expect on a big card with so much behind it. They're going to have even matches between big names. So everybody in this card is well known, but very even fights that are very hard to pick. So I'm not saying I'm going to be particularly accurate. All I can do is lay out my thought process and see if you guys follow along, and we'll see what happens. We start on the main card with Kevin Lee versus Gregor Gillespie. That's a great fight. Now, the difference here, Kevin Lee, a better puncher striker, and he also has a reach advantage, for sure. But his bread and butter, that's his go-to. Every fighter has a thing that's kind of their parachute. When everything's going wrong, I can pull this cord and get out of it. This is my fallback. This is my go-to. For Kevin Lee, it's always been his wrestling. And he's not the superior wrestler in this one. Gregor Gillespie is the better wrestler. 4 years at Edinburgh, is an All-American every year, won a national title. The guy is a phenomenal wrestler. Not only is he undefeated in MMA, but his strong suit, I think, negates the fallback for Kevin Lee. And also in the Dos Anjos fight, I thought Kevin Lee ran out of gas. Gregor Gillespie, in 15 minutes of fighting, averages almost 8 takedowns per. The guy is just relentless with the takedown. He goes for it and goes for it and goes for it. And I think that combination of taking away the advantages of Kevin Lee and the pressure of constantly defending takedowns will wear Kevin Lee out. I don't know if he gets a finish, but I think he starts pulling away. I think it's close early, much like the Dos Anjos fight. It might be close in the beginning, but as he starts wearing him down and going for that takedown, and that's the one thing that differentiates a standout Division I guy from everybody else, is that, man, they're just tenacious with the takedown. It isn't one, and I didn't get it, oh, well, start back at zero. It's go for it, go for it, go for it, until you just run out of gas. And so I think that's what happens. Yes, Kevin Lee has the striking advantage. He has a range advantage. I don't see Gregor Gillespie staying in that medium, long-range distance for very long. I see him shooting a lot, and when that happens, it's going to negate the reach advantage of Kevin Lee. So I think Gregor Gillespie gets in, uses his wrestling. I think he uses it early and often. I think that's the story of the fight. I think it looks like a wrestling match for the most part, and Gregor Gillespie's the superior wrestler. I think he goes to 14-0, and I think in a division that doesn't have very many great wrestlers in it, he can go far. I really thought a couple years ago, who's going to beat Khabib. I thought Kevin Lee stylistically might be the toughest matchup because he at the time was the best wrestler in the division, big, strong, physical. Khabib just couldn't muscle him down to the ground like he does everyone else. I think Gregor Gillespie, technically a fantastic wrestler and young, strong, and undefeated. So when I talk about style matchups that might trouble Khabib later down the road, maybe one or two more fights, Gregor Gillespie's at the top of my list. So I think he gets past Kevin Lee. I think it's an entertaining fight. I think it's close in the beginning. Then later on, Gregor Gillespie just pulls away. I think that's what happens. What's next? Next one up is Derek Lewis versus Blagoy Ivanov. Now, I called a lot of Blagoy Ivanov's fights in Bellator, and then I called the Dos Anjos fight in the UFC. I've always liked him. I think he's an excellent heavyweight. If you don't know his backstory, this is a guy, and I'll tell this story. I've told it before, but maybe you haven't heard it. I was actually in Bjorn Rebney's office talking with him about something else. I don't know why I was in the office, but when he got the call that Blagoy Ivanov had been stabbed in, I think in Bulgaria, which is where he's from, and he was dead. It wasn't, he's hurt really bad, we don't know if he's going to make it. He said, he hung up the phone, he's like, Blagoy Ivanov's dead. And I went, what do you mean he's dead? He's like, no, he got in some fight in Bulgaria and he got stabbed a dozen times and he's on life support. And that, it wasn't, oh, he's really wounded. He was dead. Bjorn hung up the phone, was like, man, he's dead. And we had this moment like, oh, man, dude. That was beyond, our profession, him being a promoter and me being a commentator. It was like, oh, my God, he's dead. That's, oh, my God. Are you calling his family? What are we going to do? And, we had this little moment of like, wow, just the heaviness of it. And if you saw him afterward, when he walked the first time, they had this video of him, and he had lost 30, 40 pounds. I mean, it was like, he was a big middleweight walking around. And for him to come back and be alive is crazy. The fact that he came back and then had successful fights and reinvigorated his career is just huge. But you can't question this guy's unbelievable character and strength in coming back. But here's the deal in this fight to me. Even in a loss to Junior Dos Santos, a big, rangy, hard hitter, and Junior Dos Santos hurt him but never got him out of there. And his ability to kind of weather the storm, his experiences, I think, both in and out of the octagon, make him very, very tough and very hard to finish. Derek Lewis is a one-trick pony at heavyweight. He hits hard. He's relentless, but he tends to start quickly, tends to finish quickly. He's had problems with his gas. He's a hard-hitting knockout heavyweight. Great. Yes, he got a late one against Volkov, but he generally tends to start quickly, look for the knockout, and then have gas problems later. Not particularly well-rounded, doesn't have a great takedown defense. His ground skills are virtually non-existent. I mean, white belt, blue belt stuff maybe. So the way I see this fight going is Derek Lewis coming out hard for the knockout, Ivanov weathering an early storm, and just picking him apart and using his other skills. Because I think past round 2, if you have a decent takedown, the problem Volkov had is Volkov was a striker too. And so even though he was piecing him up on the feet for the most part, he didn't have okay, it's round 3, I have a tired guy in front of me, I don't have to keep standing here and keep myself in the danger zone. I can do other stuff. Blagoy can. Blagoy does have good throws, Sambo background, actually beat Fedor, I think, in the Sambo World Championships. He has a good takedown, great submission game. I think he's going to go to that well a little bit more. So I think Derek has the same problem he has with Volkov, in that he's going to have a problem with his consistency of attack, his consistency of gas, where he tends to run out of gas and he recharges. But Blagoy-Ivanov can do more, meaning he can box a little bit, and when it's not going his way, he'll go in for the takedown, the clinch, and the throw. And I think with that in mind, he keeps Lewis off balance a lot, first off. And secondly, make him carry his weight and be a problem for his gas. That's always been an issue. Even when he strikes for 15 minutes, which is kind of his bread and butter, he still has problems with his gas. Let alone having a dude on top of you. Let alone a heavyweight. Let alone a guy that can transition well. So I think Blagoy-Ivanov just keeps Derek Lewis guessing enough to not stand in the pocket and eat a big punch, and then wear his gas down to where he takes him late in round 3. Might not finish him, but I think he definitely takes the late rounds and wins it. So that's 2 in a row that I think the guy I'm picking wins in the late rounds. Vicente Luque, Stephen Thompson. This is a tough one. I am not going to lie. This is a very, very tough one because Wonderboy Thompson is just so tricky. He's so difficult. He's so unorthodox. His karate style is really, really hard to simulate. He doesn't stand there and trade big punches. He's just not that guy. I think that's obviously Vicente Luque's strong suit. He has excellent knockouts. He's a big welterweight. Hard punches. Mike Perry got out with a split decision. He got out with a split decision. Before that, his previous 5 fights, all finishes. 1 submission, 4 knockouts. So it's one of those things where once he gets you in trouble, he finishes your ass. But Wonderboy Thompson is just super duper tricky. It's hard to get timing on him. It's hard to read him properly. The big step backward for Stephen Thompson was last time out against Anthony Pettis. That was a huge step backward. He got knocked out by a puffed up lightweight, and that was one of those fights. I think if he loses to Vicente Luque, and just it's a tough one to pick. I'm thinking Thompson gets back on the horse in this one. He lost to Darren Till. I thought he won the Darren Till fight. I was on the Fox desk during that one. I remember thinking he won it. Close fight though, but it was a big physical welterweight in his hometown. So tough fight for him, but didn't look bad. It looked good. He seemed to totally befuddle Jorge Masvidal. Masvidal, obviously great puncher, couldn't find any range and timing against Wonderboy because Wonderboy's feet are so good. I think the same thing happens this time. Now, my one caveat here, why I might pick against him, although I am picking him to win, is the Pettis knockout just might have been one of those crossroads fights where everything was going his way, 5 seconds left in the round, boom, and you're slept by a big lightweight. That can have a lingering effect on you, on your confidence, on your ability, and that might be the case for Wonderboy Thompson. We don't know until this fight happens. So I think the guy who beat Jorge Masvidal, the guy who got the draw with Tyron Woodley, the guy who beat Roy McDonald, the tricky guy with the incredible footwork shows up in this fight. And I think it's hard for a guy like Vicente Luque, who hasn't really fought many of those guys yet. I think he has trouble with it. He tries to land big punches. It doesn't really work out. He gets frustrated. And I think it goes to Thompson probably by decision. But if there's a lingering effect from the Pettis knockout, problem is Luque hits so hard you don't want to recover against Vicente Luque. That's not the guy you go, is my timing good? The guy hits too hard. Don't want to deal with that. So if that's the case, it's going to be a bad night for Thompson. If Thompson is Thompson and he got over that and he's okay, I think he frustrates Luque the entire time. Kelvin Gastelum, Darren Till. Now this is one. Once again, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen. All I can do is break down what has happened and how that might relate to this fight. But here's the deal. Here's what my logical brain says about this. Kelvin Gastelum, obviously, knockout over Michael Bisping, decision over Jacare, and then a decision loss to Israel Adesanya. He's taken on big, tough, versatile strikers at middleweight and been successful. All right? Israel Adesanya might be one of the pound-for-pound best strikers in all of MMA. Versatile, big, strong, fast. And it went to decision. It was a very, very tough fight. And Gastelum had success on the feet. It wasn't just, he didn't just rely on his wrestling. He was able to stand and box with Israel Adesanya and have a lot of success. Jacare, once again, big middleweight. And I was there, and he stepped forward, he put it on Jacare a lot. Michael Bisping knocked him out, former champ. So the guys who stand and bang with him, even at middleweight, don't tend to be successful. Darren Till doesn't really have the skill set to do anything else but stand and bang with Kelvin Gastelum. Not going to take him out with his wrestling. He's not going to submit him. Darren Till's going to stand and bang, and we'll see what happens. Darren Till, always a big 170-pounder. I think he's going to be a big middleweight too, or at least a filled-out middleweight, let's say. So, for some reason, this is kind of a gut pick a little bit. I really think there's going to be a come down for Kelvin Gastelum after the Israel Adesanya fight. Oftentimes there is. When a guy gets a title shot, I know it was an interim, but still a title shot came up just short. There's almost always a down there. Now, I know he had been through big fights before. He had come up short before, so it's not as though he's not a professional, because he is. There's almost always a kind of like a post-fight or the next fight. They're just not as sharp. They try to get it back. They try a little too much. There are a lot of demons after a fight like that. I don't know if Gastelum's going to fall victim to that, but I get the feeling Darren Till will be rejuvenated up at 185 pounds. I know he's lost 2 in a row. One by submission, one by KO. Two first losses of his career. I get the feeling Darren Till is going to rebound with this. Now, this is kind of a gut pick. Logically, it should be Gastelum. He's fought bigger guys. He's fought better strikers. He's been more consistent. Darren Till was undefeated until he fought Tyron Woodley, and he's lost the last 2, one by submission, one by knockout. So he's been finished in both of them. Psychologically, has he recovered from that? For some reason, I think Darren Till at 185 will be a new guy. I think he'll kind of find his passion again for fighting, and I think he might catch Kelvin Gastelum after a title fight where he came up short, and their 2 trajectories just could be different right now. Now, the one caveat here is Darren Till, if you're following the news, had a problem with his visa and is just getting into New York, I think today or tomorrow. That can really affect your cut, because he's just getting, I don't think it affects his prep because all the hard work's been done in camp before, but your cut can be really affected by a long plane fight period. You don't want to fly into country this late. You can retain a lot of water on plane flights, and so it may affect his cut. I know it's Wednesday, but it is possible that'll be an issue. So we'll see how he looks on the scale. That might change how I feel about it, but I just think that Darren Till rights the ship at 185, and I think he might catch Kelvin Gastelum on a little bit of a down after the Israel Adesanya loss, because he knows he barely missed that one, and obviously Adesanya went on to win the lineal title. Jorge Masvidal, Nate Diaz. Really looking forward to this one. I think it's going to be a phenomenal fight. How can it not be exciting? So, once again, here's what my logical brain is thinking. Here are the advantages for Masvidal. He's naturally bigger. Now, I took some crap because I put my podcast on my YouTube. It's before this, a couple before, and we talked about this fight when we weren't sure that Nate was going to fight. You know, we talked about the issues with USADA and all that stuff. And people kept calling it mad, kept getting mad that I called it a lightweight fight. Even like, it's a welterweight. I know it's a welterweight, but they are lightweights. They are lightweights fighting at welterweight. So to me, a big advantage for Masvidal is he's naturally bigger. I think he has more success at welterweight. Diaz has not had success at welterweight. So, to me, I mean, obviously outside the Conor fight, but once again, that was a lightweight fighting at welterweight. Masvidal is naturally bigger, and his hands are nice. And what I mean by that isn't just he's a hard puncher and all these things that a lot of MMA fighters are. Good, tight combinations. Masvidal is one of the few guys I look at that if, when he was younger, he had decided, I want to be a boxer, I think he could have gone that way instead of mixed martial arts and really been successful. He has really nice hands. And one thing about Diaz is he's fought some great strikers over the years. He really has. The ones that were really great boxers with great hands, I would say Conor McGregor, who beat him. And the rest of them, Donald Cerrone, a great striker all around. More of a kicker than a puncher, but I thought he mentally just kind of went, checked out of that. Gomi, I think, was a little past his prime. So who are the great boxers he's faced that he's standing up with? He's faced a couple. Melvin Gillard in his prime was good. Marcus Davis had nice hands. But what I think is going to happen here is Jorge Masvidal is going to engage him at boxing range. He's really not an outside kicker type of fighter. And he has the speed and the size and the power to take advantage of the defensive lapses that are inherent to that Diaz kind of style. Hands low, mugging, combinations, but not a ton of head movement. Doesn't always bring his hands back to where they're supposed to be. He hasn't fought a lot of guys who could take advantage of that in the striking department. I know Josh Thompson knocked him out, but most fighters take advantage of that through the wrestling because they're not. Neither Diaz has really like one shot power. So wrestlers tend to go through that, take him down, and ad nauseum, and that's it. The only striker to really stand with Nick and have success at the boxing range was Joe Diesel Riggs, if you remember that fight. And at the time, Joe Diesel had really nice hands. He was a really good boxer at the time. So I think Masvidal has the speed, has the power, and has the size to get in on Diaz in what I call the in-between moments, when he throws and kind of waits and mugs and does all this stuff. I think Masvidal has the speed to suddenly be on him. And so that Diaz will have trouble controlling range, which is really how he controls fights. His footwork isn't great. He's very flat-footed, wide stance. He uses his punches to kind of corral you and throw and throw you in spots you don't want to be in control distance. If you don't control a fighter with your feet, meaning corral them with your movement, which they generally, with the Diaz brothers generally don't do, they corral you with their hands. They're always doing this and kind of moving you and putting you in that place. Foreman did that. If you watch old Foreman fights, he would literally corral fighters with his hands, get them where he wanted them, and unload. That's what the Diaz brothers do. But it takes a certain awareness to bring your hands out there to move somebody around and not get knocked out. And I think Masvidal takes advantage of those. He has the speed and he has the fantastic boxing to make that happen. So I think it's going to be a great fight. I really do. But I'm going with Masvidal. I don't know if he finishes him. Just Diaz is so hard to finish. But I think he's the superior boxer and will essentially be, I think, a boxing match with MMA gloves on. Diaz has phenomenal jiu-jitsu. Really, really good. He's not a great wrestler. And Masvidal's size advantage and the training partners he has, I think he's going to be ready for the takedown of Diaz. Neither Diaz brother has a great takedown. And so I think what happens most of the time, if you notice the fights, both Diaz brothers, they tag you up, you get frustrated, you get a takedown, they have good guards, and they catch you. Offensive takedowns aren't generally a huge part of their arsenal, so I don't see that happening. And I see a lot of pride in this fight too. I think you want to fight for a BMF title, you want to stand and bang. Let's fight. I think Diaz is going to get into that kind of headspace and that kind of fight, and Masvidal is a little too technical for him. So those are my picks. That's what I think. Comment if you like. Let me know and subscribe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.